Hi, everyone. I'm Judy the YouTube Lawyer here with another live stream show. Today, we're moving on from legal topics just for today's show. And our special guest is going to be an author from the Boston area, Vincent Yee. So these are two of his three books that he has published. And let me tell you a little bit about Vincent Yee's background. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts. And for most of his career, he's worked for several Fortune 100 companies in various managerial roles. At all other times, he had a vision, quote, to write authentic Asian American stories where Asian Americans are the heroes in our own stories so that we may take back our own portrayal for better Asian representation. His first novel, The Purple Heart, is a story about love and courage set during the Japanese American experience in World War II. His second book is a collection of 8 riveting contemporary Asian American short stories. His third book project is a young adult Asian American series consisting of 5 books that will be launched in 1 year. Vincent Yee was a former national president for the National Association of Asian American Professionals, and that's how I met him many years ago. He's also been known to create artistic culinary dishes for friends when he is on Netflix, and he now lives in Cambridge. I don't know why I just disappeared there.
I can see you now. Yes, you went out for a second, Judy, but nice to see you again.
I know. Yeah, it's great to have the show and have a reason to reach out to people and get back in touch with a lot of like old friends and acquaintances. So it's been nice seeing you on Facebook all these years, and great to talk to you over the internet now.
Likewise.
Yeah. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about your background besides he was born in Boston?
Exactly. So, I'm born in Boston, but I lived here all my life, went to high school here, went to college here. And I know you read from the bio that I went or worked for many companies in Boston, such as Fleet Boston before it became Bank of America, Staples, and a company like that. So I spent most of my time in the digital online experience, but I've always had this knack for writing. And so I wrote my first book, as you mentioned, The Purple Heart in 2012, the Tamago Stories in 2018. And now that I had the time, I am writing this 5-book series, which is all written and hopefully will be launched within 1 year. So it's 5 books that will drop within 1 year time frame.
That's very ambitious. Yeah. How far along have you gotten with the second book?
The second book will drop in about 2 weeks, in time for the New Year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm so glad that you actually have the time to, bring your dreams to fruition, because as someone still working, like you have all these ideas, but there's really no time to dedicate, because writing, like, doesn't that take up a lot of your mental energy? You really have to focus.
Oh, it definitely does. Even just writing the first novel was in itself a big task. But now that I'm writing 5 books, I'm actually literally working on 3 books at the same time with the 2 other books just waiting for me to get to them. Obviously, book 1 is done. So book 2 is being launched, like I said, within 2 weeks. So I'm really cool. It's really cool that the illustration, the cover is coming together. But book 3 will be coming out in May in time for APA month. Book 4 will come out in August, and God willing, book 5 will come out in time for Black Friday this year, November. So, yeah.
That's great. And have your books caught the attention of, say, like ethnic studies or Asian American studies professors who might possibly, assign your books as assigned reading?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think right now, because I'm just working on so many things, book 1 is probably still in a soft launch. So I'm still building out the website and hoping that will be done by Lunar New Year. But what's really cool is that one of my friends, she's actually a teacher, so she bought 10 books for her after school AAPI program and bought them for her 10 students. So I think, as more and more people find out about it and what it can do for Asian American students, high schoolers, college students as well, and they give it a chance to read it, I think they'll see the value in having this book as for Asian American reading, because there's not that many Asian American fantasy series out there, and there are. We just need more of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Well, growing up, did you go to public schools around Boston, or where did you go to school?
I went to Brookline, so I was part of the whole Brookline school system.
Hmm.
Yep, and and that's a good question because going back to my elementary school days and high school days. So I read the Chronicles of Narnia. I read the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I read obviously the what do you call it, the Lords of the Ring, and I
Hmm.
also read Harry Potter. But the whole thing is this is, and they're great books, but none of them were Asian American. And I think we have room now for Asian American fantasy.
Hmm.
But you know what it is we need writers like myself to write these fantasy stories.
Hmm.
It was really
Yeah.
funny when I first told my friends that I was writing a Asian American fantasy story. They had no concept of what that could be, and what they envisioned was Asian Americans in a castle. And
Mhm.
so that is, they had no concept of what it could be, and that's where our imagination has to come forward and create what I think is a new genre, a new, how to say, Asian American genre in fantasy.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then where did you go to college?
I went to, what's interesting. So, this is a legal channel, so I'll throw this in a little bit.
Mhm.
I was a pre-law major.
Oh.
So it's a pre-law major, and but I decided not to become a lawyer. And in the end, I actually went to Suffolk University
Hmm.
and became a political science major. And that's actually where I did the pre-law. But in the end, I found myself in engineering, digital online experience, and I've always had my career in technology.
Oh, so what made you switch and decide that you weren't going to go to law school?
I don't think it was any, say, particular. Hmm,
Like you met some lawyers and couldn't stand them? Or they seem
No, it wasn't
miserable?
that at all. I'm actually very fascinated by the law. I remember taking, like trust and estates, constitutional law. I thought contracts was very interesting, but I just couldn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life as a career. And that's just me, nothing more, nothing less. I went into the whole entire digital online experience because at that time, the internet was coming about, the web was coming about, and I probably had an affinity towards my creativity side, my creative side.
Mhm. I see. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just to tell us a little bit about your family background. Are your parents immigrants from China or Hong Kong or something?
Yep, they're basically immigrants from Hong Kong, and
Mhm.
so it's a very typical immigrant story. So they came here, they worked the lives off per se, and were able to save enough money to buy a house in Brookline.
Mhm.
Sent me and my sibling to the Brooklyn high school system and what have you, and yeah, so very typical in that fashion.
Mhm. I see. Yeah. And so, how did you get into writing in the first place? Were you always somebody that enjoyed writing fiction when you were younger, or, active in literary clubs and,
No,
those
that's a
kinds
good
of
question.
activities?
Yeah, so I've always had a knack for creative writing. And so I did creative writing when I was in high school, and I did creative writing when I was in college. And it was all short stories, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I think one of the things is I have an imagination, and the only way for me to get these stories out of my head is to write them. Right. So I joke with people is I don't set out to write stories. I actually have them in my head already. I don't know how they're in my head. I don't know who put them in my head. But the only way to free up the gigabyte space in my head is actually to write these stories out. So the Purple Heart was the first opportunity for me to write my first novel. It's more of a bucket list item, and so I started doing that, and I was able to get that done. And I thought that was going to be my first and last book that I was going to write, but the stories were still in my head and they just kept ruminating in my head. And so that's when in 2018, August, I was able to get the short story collection, the Tamago Stories, out. And so I freed up more space in my head, but I always had this young adult age my fantasy story, which at first was going to be a trilogy, which is already, a challenge in itself. One book is a challenge, three was a big challenge. And then when I finally had the time to write the outline for Clara Wu books, it came out to five books, and I just made more work for myself. But
Mhm.
I wanted to get these out because they're in my head and they exist for a reason. And the only way that people can read them is if I write them.
Yeah. Great. Well, so Tony is one of the regular viewers. Thank you for being here. So I guess you already answered this. When did you start writing? Any
Yep.
favorite books you've read in the past that impacted you?
So what's interesting is I don't do a lot of leisure reading. Now I read all the Harry Potter series. I'm a huge fan of the Sword of Shannara series as well. I read all of those. I loved Terry Brooks, his stories. But I also read like the Da Vinci Code, and that was a great story. I have a whole stack of books which I bought from Amazon, which I intend on reading once I get through my 5-book launch. And so I do have some reading to catch up on. But when I do find a series I do like, I give my full attention to it.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's talk about your first book. The viewers out there may not know that your first book is based on a family that's put in one of those internment camps during
Yeah.
World War II, a Japanese American family, and there's like a love story involved.
Right.
And I mean, I can only imagine that probably required you to do tons of research so that everything you wrote was historically accurate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, so you're totally right about that. It is a historical fiction. And so I need to be true to the historical timeline. So I spent probably a year doing research. And this was back in 2004. And at that time, without the internet was still very new, there was not that much information to be found on the internet. But whatever I could gather, whatever books or one film I could gather, I was able to piece together a timeline, a historical timeline. And then one of the things was I visited the Japanese American National Museum in LA. And that was really important as well to see everything. I want to feel myself in the artifacts. They had a reconstructed barrack as well, and just to imagine myself in there. But the whole thing with the Purple Heart was I needed a premise. I needed an angle. So when I did research on this, and I knew I wanted to be a World War II piece, and when I did more research, the internment of the Japanese American, that's a very notable Asian American historical point. So I did more research. I found out about the 442nd, and they were the Japanese regiment that fought in World War II. And despite their family, their girlfriends and sisters and brothers being imprisoned in these internment camps, when this country asked them to fight, 4,500 young Japanese Americans volunteered to fight for this country. And if that is not an act of patriotism, I don't know what is. And for a regiment of their size, they were awarded 9,487 Purple Hearts. And I just felt that that was a story that had to be told. But again, I needed an angle. So the angle was a Japanese American woman finds the love of her life, a Japanese American man on the internment camp, but then they are separated by the war. And that is a Hollywood story right there. But I needed to make sure that it wasn't a historical piece. And the way that I did that was I brought the present time with the granddaughter. So it starts off with the granddaughter whose grandfather, the one who fought in World War II in the 442nd, never returned home. But the granddaughter finds a clue in present time as to her grandfather. And then she delves into her family history to try to find out what happened to her grandfather. And that is the story of the Purple Heart.
Yeah, yeah. So without giving away the whole story, yeah, it is a pretty riveting story that, is just so remarkable because you're bringing this to modern day life,
Yeah.
making it relevant for people of all cultures to learn about Japanese American history in particular and how the internment affected them.
Yeah.
So tell me more about like who did you talk to in order to write this? Because it sounds like you made a lot of connections with a lot of like famous Japanese American activists and
So what's interesting is during the research phase, I actually didn't talk to anyone in person. I didn't interview anyone in person, but I found the interviews online. And then what it was, I just need to find the historical timeline. And then from the historical timeline, I was able to base the fictional timeline on top. And that's what I did. But once the book was published, I had the opportunity to meet amazing people. And I met two 442nd veterans who fought in World War II. And it was just such amazing to meet them. One is actually here in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And the other one, I went all the way to Hawaii to meet. And that's
Wow.
Herbert Yamamura. And it was just amazing to meet him as well. So I also met some politicians who were involved. I met Senator Daniel Inouye's wife. I actually sent a book to Senator Daniel Inouye, and he actually responded with a letter before he passed away. So it was an honor to receive that letter from him. And I think one of the cool things, though, is, when in the beginning, when I first told people about my book, The Purple Heart, they would ask me, "Oh, so Vincent, are you Japanese American?"
Mhm.
So it's interesting because I'm Chinese American, writing about the Japanese American experience, and I'll share one story with you really quick. So I remember giving the manuscript, I should say, to a friend of mine to read who was interned during World War II when she was a child. And so I'm at her home. I'm explaining the book, and after I'm done explaining, she looks at me, she goes, Vincent, what does a Chinese American guy know about Japanese American experience? It's like, yes, I know, but give the book a chance, give the manuscript a chance. And she gave me a very skeptical eye. She goes, okay, I'll read it, Vincent. And it was probably 2 weeks in, and I'm watching Saturday Night Live. I totally remember this. It's Saturday Night Live, it's on Saturday. It's like 11:45 p.m. And all of a sudden I get an email from her. It comes across my email. And all it says was, I'm done. That's all it said on the subject header. And I'm like, okay, I'm done because it's awful. I'm done.
Yeah, was she pissed off?
Yeah, exactly. I had no idea. And so I was a little skeptical or apprehensive about opening the email. But then I opened the email and she said, Vincent, you wrote a story that captured my heart from the very beginning. Thank you for writing this book. And that was just such affirmation for the book, and that I did them honor and justice, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that the book, even though it's written by me, but I wrote it from an Asian American perspective, because in the end, what could happen to the Japanese American can happen to any Asian American here in the US. And I wrote it from that perspective. And she was great. She gave me a lot of, how should we say, advice or other feedback to help make the book a little more authentic, or just little nuances and details here and there. So I was very appreciative for her feedback. So.
Yeah. And then afterwards, when you were trying to get publicity for that book, I mean, did you just send out copies to a bunch of people? Or
I did. You know
press
what?
releases?
No, you're totally right. I mean, I think one of the things that an author usually does is they order a ton of books and they try to send it to people or try to get them to read it. And, and it's tough because all these people are really busy as well. And that was that was 2012. Social media wasn't that big just yet.
Yeah.
So it was a different time. And I will also share this back in 2004, because the manuscript was actually written in 2004. And it sat on my shelf literally for 8 years because I tried getting a literary agent. And I got to tell you, some of the feedback that I got from the literary agents were not very kind. The feedback was simply, Vincent, this is a story that America does not want to hear.
Oh.
Right? And it was, and I'm glad that they were that blunt or that candid, because it really showed me how Asian American stories at that time was actually received. So it sat on my shelf for 8 years until Amazon came along and Kindle came into play. And that changed the entire book publishing industry for authors like myself. And so, I couldn't wait for a literary agent to see the promise behind the story of what it could really do. So I just got myself on the Amazon publishing platform and got it out there.
Okay, great. Well, I'm sure plenty of people, a lot of times people, myself included, think like, oh, I would like to one day write a book, but of course you think that, oh, well, it's going to be so much trouble and so much work, and who has time right now, but do you want to go ahead and tell us more about how you actually published your books through Amazon?
Yeah, so the whole process there is only two things on Amazon that you need. You need your Word document, which is the entire content, and then you need a cover. And you marry those two together on the Amazon platform, and it comes together. Mind you, there are a ton of questions we ask on the Amazon platform, but I really think most of the work actually comes from the content itself, the writing, the editing, the proofing. I think one of the advantages for the Purple Heart, because it wrote in 2004, it was originally like almost 378 pages, single-space doc, a Word doc, huge. Wow. So I had to condense that down because I never thought about the production aspect, that producing such a large book would actually cost more. So I got it down to about 310 pages in a Word doc. So I had to cut out 60 pages, but there was a lot of editing, so it was very refined, even by 2012. And I think is the whole thing with Purple Heart, I probably read that book probably 40 times. And one of the things that a writer usually does towards the end is to read the book out loud, anywhere from 2 to 3 times at least. Because the thing is when you read things out loud, you catch things that your mind doesn't catch when you're just reading it to yourself. So. Yeah.
Well, is there any initial cost? Like, do you have to pay Amazon to do this in the first place?
None whatsoever, which is great, because
good.
I think that's how Amazon changed everything. It's print on demand, right? POD.
Hmm.
So the print on demand is great because you just upload the files. If someone orders it, they print on demand. You pay for the cost of the book, and then there's a royalty structure that Amazon has for the paperback and also for the Kindle, and that's all you have to deal with. So it's actually pretty easy. It's pretty easy.
Wow, that makes it so easy. Gosh,
It
now I'm
does.
going to be thinking for the next week, like what books I would like to write
I
someday.
know they totally disrupted the whole industry. So yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing. Well, I mean, could you order a bunch yourself and get a discount somehow so that you could sell your books yourself?
So that's an interesting question because I didn't know this in 2012. So I bought a ton of what is called author copies, and I literally sold them out of the trunk of my car.
Mhm.
But the problem is because the author copies, they don't count towards sales.
Oh,
So I didn't know that at the in the beginning because it was still so new per se.
mhm.
But what really counts is the number of times that someone orders from the Amazon platform, and that is like the official record for sales. And so that's why I need to sell these books. I need to get people to buy them and increment the sales count, because once they get over to say hopefully 10,000 one day, it will finally get on the radar. Hopefully, a literary agent and say, "Hey, 10,000 copies were sold. Let's take a look at this book." Or 10,000 copies can become credible, and perhaps Amazon Studio or Netflix will take a look at it as well. So
Wow, so interesting. But this is great that now it's like power to the people, where if
yeah,
you feel like you want your voice heard, then it's so easy to get it out there thanks to
yeah.
Amazon.
So there is that part, and then there's the marketing. So because I don't have a publisher backing me, so I have to do all the marketing myself,
Mhm.
and so that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge. If you have a publisher, then they use their marketing muscle to push the book forward. Just like with any movie, sometimes movies flop, sometimes books flop as well. But at
Mhm.
least in this case, a publisher, which is akin to say a movie studio, they would take on all the effort there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely talk more marketing later. But to get to one of the
Yep.
questions out there, Tony asks if users buy your book on Kindle, can they read it anywhere they have the Kindle app? Is it more convenient than plain old books?
Yep. So yeah, once you have the Kindle app, you can read it from anywhere. So that's the convenience of Kindle.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, is it cheaper to get the book on Kindle?
it is because it's only the electronic version, so there's no production. So the promo pricing right now for the paperback is $9.99, and the
Mhm.
Kindle version is $4.99.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel so technologically illiterate, but I've never even used Kindle. I still like good old paper, like I
Yeah.
wanna hold the book and
Yes.
know that I have it, and I
There's
can
a
just
lot. There's a lot of
open
people who love books, and Judy, whenever I see you again, I will autograph your books for you because unfortunately I cannot autograph a Kindle.
it. Yeah, yeah. Well, did you do any book readings? Obviously now with COVID, you probably can't do any book readings, but did you go out to, like, universities or any events to
I
do this?
did, yeah.
Yeah,
So I did. I probably did it more for the Purple Heart. I was
yeah.
on the college circuit for a bit. I attended ICASU, I attended BASA, and I attended a lot of college workshops as well.
Mhm.
And I didn't do too much reading. It's funny, as a writer, I don't really like to read my book out loud per se, but which is why, like for example, Clara Wu and the Porter book, I actually got a voice artist, a voice narrator, and so now I actually have her narrating chapters 1 through 6 and the dust jacket cover as well. So I have those now as digital collateral that I can use in any setting that I may be in.
Mhm. Yeah, and I thought I saw something on Facebook where you had actually collaborated with some sushi restaurant where they were letting you, like, market your book with tamago or
Yeah,
sushi.
yeah.
Yeah.
At that time when the Tamago Stories came out, right? And again, I mentioned earlier the reason why I got these 8 stories out of my head. I need to get 8 stories out of my head, and
Mhm.
the reason why it's called the Tamago Stories was because the stories or the characters in the Tamago Stories, they're Chinese, they're Korean, they're Vietnamese, they're Thai, and they're Taiwanese. And so I look at it this way: is they all come together like a scrambled egg,
Mhm.
in this case tamago, and great, fortunately there was actually a Japanese word, or in this case an Asian word that happened to be Japanese, tamago, that represents the Asian market community, and that's the reason behind the name of Tamago Stories. And
Mhm.
then obviously I contacted a few friends of mine who own Japanese restaurants, and they were more than happy to tie in their tamago with
Yeah.
the Tamago book. And so that was an attempt to try to find a fun way to tie in. And same with the Purple Heart. A few of my friends who own restaurants actually named some of their drinks after my book called the Purple Heart. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, there are just so many different ways if people have a business or whatever, then they can try to tie that into you marketing your books
Totally.
and yeah, get your name out and stuff. Well, Tony has more questions here. Thank you for having questions. Are there any characteristics of Asian American literature that's distinct from others?
Totally.
Wow,
So I
really?
guess yeah. So I guess that's the whole thing, right? As you know, I mentioned before when I was telling some friends I was writing an Asian American fantasy, they had no concept of what that is. But you know, if you research Chinese, Japanese, Korean folklore, there are so many stories there, so many things are for inspirations. So in Clara Wu in the Porter book, you're going to be introduced to monsters and creatures and demons that actually are coming from Asian folklore that are part of the whole warlock demon army. And that will come into play. These have never been from what I've seen in American film. So it just opens up a whole new array of imagination and things to see. And then the way that I envision a lot of the kingdoms within the realm of Asian or the Asian realm, all are my imagination. And I re-engineered, re-transformed how these Asian realms can look, even different than what we see on TV because it is in a totally, entirely different realm. So my imagination just totally went there and created things that people have not seen. I think another aspect about the books as well is I give my books to readers. So I had to find, it's funny, I tell my friends this. I said, I had to wait for my friends to get married and have kids so they can write this book and write this series. So I reached out to a few of my friends who have higher middle grades kids, teenagers, to read the book, to give me feedback. And some of the things, the feedback was great. I mean, some of the feedback came from 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds. And they were like, my God, I've never, ever envisioned an Asian American fantasy to even look like this. So it's all brand new. It's all brand new. It's great.
Yeah. Well, this kind of ties into another question from Tony. Is there such a thing as an intended demographic for your books? If Europeans want to learn about Asian American culture, will they feel a connection?
So I think so, right? I mean, that's the whole thing is if the story is written well and you escape into this realm and you're totally captivated by it and you see something totally different because we always want to see something new and different, which is cool. But, obviously I think one of the things about this book is the classic good versus evil is in this book, right? So that's the theme that any reader can totally tie into. But in this book, Clara Wu and the Porter book, they're going to see something totally entirely new. I think what's cool about this book as well is that it takes place in the present. So there are a lot of Asian American fantasy books out there in series, but I find that they are period pieces, meaning they are, let's say, historical 1900s, 1800s, but nothing in the present per se. So this takes place in the present, and it involves 4 Asian American teenagers: Clara Wu, Yuka Sato, Sung Kim, and Dan Win. And what's great is they're paired up with their guardian animals within the Asian realm. So it's a white tiger, which is part of Korean culture, the red crowned crane, which is part of Japanese culture, the water buffalo, Vietnamese culture, and of course, a panda. Who doesn't love a panda? And it's a panda, which is part of Chinese culture. And so I married those things to create what I think is an amazing fantasy story.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Ranma One Half. Did you ever watch Japanese anime where they had a panda character that talked?
So I don't know that one particularly, but I have watched anime in the past.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly.
Yeah, so that's kind of funny. And there actually is a famous world figure skating champion named Yuka Sato who coaches around Michigan now, I think. So that's kind of funny. But
Interesting. Okay.
yeah. So Tony asked again, how much time does it take for a book to go from ideas written down to publishing? Well, you said it took you over 8 years even after you had written that first book, right?
The first book, right?
Yeah.
And because I didn't have control over the resources.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was, so back in 2012, I was working for Staples, and unfortunately, I got unstapled, which is my euphemism for being laid off.
Oh.
But after a day of commiserating, I realized what I wanted to do. I said, I'm going to set a 100-day plan to get this book published because I left with the severance package and everything. And so I laid out Project Plan 100 because I had the manuscript already. It just needed to go through a little more editing, going through the whole entire Amazon publishing platform for the first time. And I was able to get it published in 100 days. And then what's funny is Staples, the company that laid me off, brought me back in for a book signing.
Oh,
So
how
that's kind of,
funny.
yeah, it's kind of
What
cool.
do you mean they brought you back? Like they brought you to the office to do a book signing or
So,
at one of their stores or what?
no, so what happened was I let my former colleagues know, and they were so excited for it because they said, "Oh my God, this is such a great story." And so they brought me back because a lot of them wanted to buy the book to support me. And so a good number of them bought the book to support me, and they wanted to just bring me back, and, as a guest, as a former colleague who wrote a book in 100 days after being unstapled. And it was a great story. So I kind of left on my own terms, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. I mean, that speaks highly of you that they would invite you back and be like, come on, we want to buy your book and stuff.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
So how strict can reviewers get? Sometimes on Goodreads, the audience can be tough, I hear, right? I mean, I guess like, especially if they're anonymous, sometimes they can be really mean,
Yeah.
right? Like, get you
Oh, yeah.
down.
And that's just part of the territory. Unfortunately, there are the whole thing is that my book is not going to appeal to everyone, but to the demographic, I think Tony had mentioned that before. So so I do have a demographic as a young adult, but I've seen higher grade, middle grade students, 9-year-olds who have been able to read it. So I know of 2 9-year-olds who were able to read the book in 2 days as of today. And then I have adults who are reading as well. It should read very much like Harry Potter, meaning Harry Potter was intended for children as well. But in the end, every single adult and their grandmother was reading the book. So, it's really funny. I'll share a story. I was at the airport and there was this passenger trying to get checked in. And actually, no, wait, I remembered that wrong. It was actually me. I was trying to get checked in. And my luggage was overweight by like 3 pounds. So I opened my luggage and said, oh my God, what can I take out? The Harry Potter book. So I took out the Harry Potter book, zipped it back up, put it on the scale, and it was made 50 pounds. So I just read the Harry Potter book, but I wasn't the only one. I turned on the plane, I just turned around, half the plane was reading Harry Potter at that time. It was actually a funny story, so.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, even if it's sort of meant for younger people, there's nothing wrong with adults enjoying it too, right?
Totally. I just want to make sure, I want to make sure I get to Tony's question. So yes, there are going to be tough reviews and you take them, but the whole goal is hopefully your target audience who can appreciate the book will write good reviews. And I just can't take them personally. That's all. But so far right now, as of today, I've got 5 reviews that gave me 5 stars. So
awesome. Yeah. Great. Yeah, I'll get around to writing reviews sometime this week. So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for being here, AKAFT. As I don't know if you've already discussed this, which authors have influenced you? Are there Asian American authors that have influenced your writing?
So I think in terms of of the fantasy, I like the whole Terry books. I like Harry Potter. And I think one of the things with Harry Potter was I wanted to write in such a way, a book that was intended for young adults, but could be read by everyone. So, the experience that Harry Potter brought to the masses, I wrote Clara Wu in such a way to hopefully bring to the masses as well, to show what an Asian American fantasy, an epic Asian American fantasy could look like with a diverse cast and kingdoms and world building. I don't know if you saw my Facebook, but the fan art from the kids are just precious. You have kids drawing pandas, you have kids drawing tigers. And that's why I want to inspire. I want kids to be so attached to the characters that, that they talk about them, they draw them, and hopefully one day they will hope that there are Halloween costumes for them as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of drawing, so the person that drew the cover of your book is someone named Tony Long or Long?
Timmy Luong, yep.
Yeah. So how did you get in touch with him? Were you already friends with him or something?
Yeah, so it was interesting is just on the Facebook groups and what have you, I came across some of his work and I really liked it. So, and this was probably more than a year ago, but I liked his work and I kept it. And once I was ready to find an illustrator, or once I realized that I couldn't illustrate the book myself, so I reached out to him and he was more than happy to take it on as commissioned work. And he did a great job. I really felt that he really brought the characters to life, with the ensemble cast. So you have the Emperor and Empress warriors along with their guardians.
Yeah. So just to give Timmy a little publicity, here's his Instagram. I'll put it in the chat box.
Yeah, definitely.
Timmy draw in stuff.
That's drawing
Interesting.
without the G. That's drawing without the G.
Yeah,
But
draw win.
yes.
And what's your Instagram?
My Instagram is Clara Wu Books.
Okay. So is it all one word?
All one word. Yeah. Clara Wu Books.
Wu Books.
I'm still building the audience for that, but yes.
Okay, Instagram. Okay, so I guess I need it. Yeah, I'm hardly on Instagram, so I'll get on it eventually.
Yeah, by all means. And, obviously your viewers would love to have you there as well. I think right now I'm working on the website. So I've been teaching myself Bootstrap this weekend. And I think I've got a good handle on how to build a website now using Bootstrap. So hopefully that will be up within a week. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, technology has really advanced since, was it 2004 when you first wrote your first book?
Yes, very much so. And what's interesting is you talked about that. I didn't even have the website up for the Purple Heart until 1 year later. And now this time around, things are coming, aside from 5 books keeping me busy, because right now, book 3 is in the hands of the readers and they're almost all done. And book 3, the manuscript then will go to the editor and then I'll start working on book 4. But the website will hopefully be done this week and the audio teaser's already been done. So same thing with my illustrator. I found my audio or the voice narrator on Facebook as well through one of the AgeMark and creative networks. And so I found her, I liked her work, I kept her reference, and then I finally reached out to her and she did a great job. So for those who want to listen to the first 6 chapters, you can find it on, you should be able to find it on the Clara Wu Books Facebook page. So if you just search for Clara Wu Books on Facebook, you'll find it there.
Okay.
And she did a great job. She had to imitate 11 voices.
Oh.
Yeah, so she did a great job.
Jeez. I mean, and you have to pay her, right? Because
yeah.
that's like voice actor work.
I did. And the great thing about this is as an Asian American content creator, if I can help and create opportunities for other Asian American creatives, whether it's voice, actors, or illustrators, I'm more than willing to pay, because there are so many Asian Americans who are trying to break into the creative aspect, but the opportunities are not there, or they're not as much there as we would like it to be. So that's why I think, for example, Shang-Chi, right, the movie Shang-Chi, when it came out, it creates so much opportunity for Asian Americans who are in Hollywood, in the media, who want to be part of this project.
Great. Okay. So Tony asked, what's your most sophisticated book? Which one has had the most thought into it over time? Anyone that you're more proud of? That's kind of like asking, like, which one of your kids do you like better?
This is how I would frame it this way is each one is different. So as an author, the Purple Heart is historical fiction. The Tamago Stories is 8 short stories, and they range from crime action, they range from legal drama, medical drama, there's even sci-fi and a rom-com. So that's like 8 different genres in one book. And now you have a young adult fantasy series. So a lot of authors are usually one genre, but I think you can see from my collective work, I've been able to span totally different genres. So I will let the readers decide what they think is the most sophisticated, but in the end, I hope you enjoy the books, the stories as well. I will say that in the Tamago Stories, I like all the stories, but the Perfect Match is a great story. It's probably one of my favorite pieces or short stories I've ever written. And you can actually find that on YouTube as well. So you can actually listen to the whole entire novella on YouTube if you search for Perfect Match Vincent Yee or Perfect Match The Tamago Stories, and you can listen to the entire novella.
Interesting. Yeah, I did read this is kind of funny. Like, did you know my cousin Leroy? He was also, because he was also on the NAP National Board or something, So he's still living around here in the Triangle area. He's married with 2 kids now, so he doesn't do any NAP stuff at all. I mean, all of us older folks, we've handed it down to the younger people.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the funny thing is that your very first little short story in here rang a bell because I remember telling my aunt about him just hanging out with this woman from mainland China. They were like going to run a race together. So they were training together. It wasn't even really dating. And
Oh,
then my uncle freaked out because this was an aunt who told the other aunt, who was his mother, that, oh, we think he's dating this woman from mainland China. Oh my God. It's like, like this is a tragedy. We got to stop.
oh my God.
So his
That's drama
dad,
right there.
yeah, so his dad called me up and was like almost like yelling in the phone saying, "Hey, tell him that he cannot spend, don't even be friends. Those people from mainland China are no good, and
Oh
you
my
know,
God.
she's just going to use him and bring her whole family over and then divorce him and take all his money. This happened to our family friend's kid, like
Oh my
those
God.
terrible women from mainland China."
That's a story in itself.
Yeah, I feel like I should write my own Tamago stories now. I am very inspired,
Oh, cool. Very cool.
because
Yeah.
I feel like all of us have multiple stories that we could tell that would be interesting, especially if they're, I mean, how much of this is sort of based on your real life or your friends' lives?
Oh, what's interesting is it's not based too much on my life. Mind you, there may be some things personally that I may inject in there for context, but
Mhm,
a lot of it is from my imagination.
mhm,
And yes, I think the whole thing is when I try to see the characters, I try to think of a certain friend who could be Korean American or Vietnamese, and I would say, how would he or she act in this situation? And then I kind of write from their perspective into the book. So, and that's how I basically create the characters and their
mhm.
personalities per se. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure, since both of us were active in a lot of Asian American groups and stuff, we've met lots of like interesting characters, people with distinct personalities and
Very much so.
family drama, romantic drama, it's just, yeah, we could definitely tell more stories and stuff. Although like, did you ever wonder if people would get mad at you for writing certain things?
There's a part in the book where it says, if anything sounds familiar, it's actually
Yeah.
all fiction.
Yeah, this is all a work of fiction. It
It's
is not
all a
meant
work
to
of fiction.
portray anyone in real that exists in real life, yada yada. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Before your friends all get mad at you and say, "Hey, I told you that, and you're not supposed to be like spilling all the dirty laundry about my family."
Definitely none of that in my book at all. So, like I
Yeah.
said, I would probably say 95% is from my imagination. So, the perfect match, the marathon is a theme, but I have never run a marathon in my life.
Yeah.
So all
Yeah.
that was from my imagination. But I did have to interview people who did run marathons, um, and obviously, certain themes came out that I was able to repeat within the book, which would make sense for a marathon runner. And so I think what was really cool is some of my marathon friends who actually read the book was like, "Wow, Vincent, you really captured every single foot of pain that I went through in the book or when I ran the marathon. So good job."
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Any unpublished writings or books you're keeping for the right time, if ever?
Hmm. So I think Tony's asking if I have them in my head. So like I said, this Clara Wu book series, I'm trying to get this out first, so that's going to be 5. Probably in my head right now, I probably do have the sequel to The Purple Heart, and I probably do have about 6 to 8 other short stories in my head. So we'll see how well this first Clara Wu book does, and then we'll see whether I have time to get those other books and stories out as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, tell us more about your marketing efforts, and you have any more interviews lined up or media
Yeah, yeah.
publicity?
So this Friday that's coming up, I've got another podcast, and it's was Dr. Stephanie Wong, and she runs a podcast called Color Success. So
Mhm.
I have the opportunity to be interviewed by her, and so that'll be Friday. That'll be 6:30 Eastern time, and 3:30 PST Pacific time. So I'll be on that, and I'm hoping that as I do more, you have actually the distinct honor, Judy, for being the first to interview me. So thank you so
Well,
much.
okay, sure. Yeah, but I feel like that's kind of sad, isn't it? I mean, there should be more outlets out there for people to be able to publicize their books.
No, I totally agree. I would love to get say the Mei Lee show. I think the Mei Lee show is great. I would love to be on a
What's
podcast with
that?
her. So Mei Lee is a journalist, and she does these weekly, if not daily, podcasts or Instagram videos of things that's on her mind, but she also does interviews as well. So I think, as I said, hopefully it starts with one, then two, and then starts to have more. The Fung brothers, the Fung brothers are
Oh, yeah.
also great as well. And I know they're always trying to be on top of Asian representation, which is a really big thing for the Asian American community now, is to have positive Asian representation. So we'd love to be on the Fung brothers show as well one day. And I know there are a few other ones as well. Asian Boss Girl, I would love to be on Asian Boss Girl as well. And what's interesting, so Helen Wu, she's a Wu. I think she should read my book because it's called Clara Wu. So I think all Wus, Kims, Wins, and Satos should actually unite.
Okay. Well, but how do people even get to this podcast? Like, is there some website you go to?
So you go to Color of Success, and it'll be listed there. And she'll be doing her social media as well to list it. So yes, she actually just got a recent nomination as well for an Asian American podcast. I forgot exactly which organization nominated her, but I think it was Crane something. But if you go to Color of Success, her website, it'll be all listed there.
Oh, so the website is called colorofsuccess.com.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, yeah, because I've never even heard of this person before. Is she someone you just already knew around Boston or something?
No, she's actually in California. And so again, she's someone I networked, and we're actually Facebook friends as well. And so finally, when the book launched, I reached out to her. And so she talks about, I guess, the psychology of being Asian American. So we're going to talk about it from the perspective of exclusion, right? How we're marginalized and how we become invisible. And the only way to actually change that is to write our stories, to write our books, to get ourselves out there. And so we're going to tackle it from that perspective. And I think it's going to be great.
Great. Okay. Anything else you would like our viewers to know about you or your writing?
No, off the top of my head, I would just say, if you've never read an Asian American fantasy, I would want you to give Clara Wu and the Portal book or the Clara Wu books a chance. I also think this is probably one of the most aggressive book launches that I know of, that 5 books are going to be launched literally within less than a year. And you'll be able to binge it. You're going to be able to binge it by November of this year, God willing. So
yeah, maybe you should start printing T-shirts or selling tote bags or
merch,
something.
right?
This artwork is really well done. I mean, it looks like one of those like Japanese anime type things.
Yeah. So the thing with Timmy is his artistic bent is towards the anime part, and I thought it fit well with my book and what I wanted to try to do. You're gonna really like the cover for book 2. I think it's very dramatic, and the title, and so yes.
Yeah, they should have. I mean, it should be in color or something. But yeah, I mean, is he going to do the covers for your other books?
Right now, that's the plan. So book 2 is already done. I haven't had a chance to touch base with him yet about book 3, but we have that as an open item. And so I like to keep the continuity if possible and have him do all 5 covers for my 5 books, at least for this volume.
Yeah. Okay. So what is next for you? Well, I guess you're still writing those.
Yeah,
other
I'm still
books,
writing.
right?
So Tony, I think the best question for that is ask me in the end of the year, and we shall see. Because right now I'm just focused on getting these 5 books out.
Okay. So is Amazon the only place where people can buy your book?
Currently, right now it is. Amazon is the only place. You can order the paperback for $9.99, which is a promo price. And then you can order the Kindle, which is $4.99. So yes.
Yeah, so that's within everyone's budget. I mean, I do feel like, I either want to buy another copy or give this copy to my son's middle school because, I bet they don't have hardly any Asian American themed books or history books even. So
I think that's a great idea. So I think what's really cool. So some of my friends are actually going to order another book and give it to the librarian or talk to their schools about it as well, because there isn't a, say, higher middle grade or a young adult Asian American series that they can pitch to the schools yet. So I would definitely encourage that, Judy. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh, well, one last question. Well, you didn't really tell us more about yourself. So what do you do in your spare time? And it sounds like you really like cooking and food and stuff. So you want to mention anything about that?
So right now there is no spare time. Let's put it this way, when I'm not writing, and as mentioned, Cooking is one of my favorite pastimes. I just had the opportunity to cook for some friends this past Sunday. It was great because they were all very careful. They all took the COVID at home test as well to make sure that we're all negative. And but I was definitely out of practice, but I was still able to cook for 2 appetizers, 2 entrees, and 2 desserts in the end. And I'll post this on Facebook. I think you've probably seen some of my food pictures.
Your food,
So, yeah, and my creativity comes into my food as well. So my whole perspective on food is to buy everyday ingredients and transform them into beautiful, sexy food. And all my friends will probably agree it's beautiful and sexy.
Okay. Well, maybe you should write some story like, what was that Mexican movie that was about like eating and stuff? Was it Chocolat or something? Or, yeah, it was
Yeah.
like famous probably like 20 something years ago, but it was all about like food as like a allegory for human interactions or whatever. Yeah, but it was some sort of like set in Mexico movie.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but anyway, either way, it's just yet another idea for you, write some
Yeah.
food related story or
Well, what's really
cookbook.
interesting in Clara Wu, food is actually a big aspect of the book, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things is, unfortunately, Asian American kids are made fun out of because of the food they eat from other kids, and that's really sad. And so I wrote in the book to normalize our food and to be proud of our foods as well. So that's why I inserted it into the book. And as much as they're into a fantasy world, but the 4 teenagers, the 4 Asian American teenagers, they're Asian Americans. And in the book, they actually talk about some of the challenges they face as Asian American teens, and they deal with it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, definitely, because I remember, when I was little, I hated going to Chinese school also,
Mm.
and, we all spoke in English at home and,
Yep.
ate American food and stuff, so I really hated going to Chinese restaurants, so yeah, I mean, 'cause once again, you just really inspire me to think like, "God, someday I wanna write something too,"
And
then
you
I can be
can,
like
you
Vincent
definitely
Yee.
can.
Yeah,
So yes,
cool.
and you brought up a good point because this is a young adult book. I had to change my style and tone so the readability was there. Not to say at the child level that an adult can't read it, but just at the right reading level so that in this case 9-year-olds can read it and adults can read it as well, and obviously the target market. And I
Yeah.
think what makes the book, once you finish the book, it really delves into some really complicated subplots. That's what makes it engaging. So because you have teenagers, Asian American teens, who are dealing with life and death situations, and they have to battle a demonic warlock to save the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I really do feel like it's something that would lend itself to, just like We Bare Bears, where they're
Yeah.
selling T-shirts and,
Yes.
pencil cases and tote bags and stuffed animals and stuff. Yeah.
You brought up a good point. So many students, so many people had grew up on Harry Potter. It was part of their lives, or the Chronicles of Narnia, or the Lord of the Rings. And I would love that this book, the Clara Wu book, for all readers, but especially for Asian Americans, that it becomes part of their growing up per se, especially their formative years, and so that they have someone to look up to who will look like them as they grow up.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's all about representation and making the literary world a little bit more diverse. Yeah.
totally, totally.
So thank you so much, Vincent. It's almost about an hour.
Wow,
So,
it's almost an hour. Amazing.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you guys for being here. Thank you to the viewers who asked so many good questions and everything. And I hope you guys will go to Amazon.com and order some of Vincent's books so he can get higher up in the Amazon rankings.
Yes, thank you so much for
Yeah.
everyone, to all your readers. To all your viewers today, thank you for coming on and watching.
Yeah, and next week we'll get back to our legal topics again. Next Sunday, 5 p.m., we're going to be speaking with a law partner at a bigger firm in North Carolina. His name is Stephen Epstein, and he's also been writing books too in his spare time. It seems like everybody wants to write books as they get older, but he's written a couple of true crime novels, and so hopefully people will join in and listen to hear about Steve Epstein and his experiences too. So, Vincent, why don't you hang on for another minute and
Sure.
I'll say goodbye to the viewers then. Thanks for
Great.
being
Thank you
here,
so much.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.